So think about this for a second. You've got this small country kind of tucked away on the edge of Europe, and yet somehow it becomes this global superpower, literally changes the map of the world. How do they even do that? And, what can we learn from their journey today?
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing, isn't it? Portugal, I mean, they started off with some real disadvantages, geographically, economically, but they just transformed themselves, became the pioneers of the age of discovery. What always gets me, though, is how they overcame the fear, not just, sailing challenges, but that really deep-seated fear of the unknown.
That's a great point. Was it just sheer willpower? Or, were there specific innovations, maybe a leader with a vision that helped them break through those mental walls? So today, that's what we're diving into, Portugal's age of discovery. We're going to follow the timeline, from those first careful steps down the African coast,
Yeah.
all the way to the huge voyages that basically connected continents. We'll look at the key people, the tech, the big impacts, the good, and, well, sometimes the not so good. We've got a stack of sources here, history books, academic papers, even some old travel diaries. The goal is to pull out the really important stuff so you walk away with a solid understanding of this absolutely pivotal time. Okay, so let's paint the picture. Early 15th century, Portugal is, well, let's be honest, kind of poor. Stuck way out on the western edge of Europe. They're cut off from all that rich Mediterranean trade, right? That's dominated by the Italians, Venice, Genoa, and the Muslim empires.
Exactly. And if you look overland, the routes to Asia, the Silk Road stuff, increasingly dicey. Plus, they're often blocked by the Ottoman Empire, especially after Constantinople falls in 1453. So there's this growing pressure across Europe. They need another way to get to the spices, the gold, all that Eastern wealth.
And it wasn't just about getting around physical blockades, was it? There were massive mental hurdles, too. I mean, the common belief back then, the earth is flat, sail too far, you fall off the edge, sea monsters everywhere. It sounds crazy to us now, but...
Oh, absolutely. Sailing out into the open ocean wasn't just dangerous. It felt like tempting fate, defying everything people thought they knew. The less proof you had, the bigger the fear, right? Because there was nothing to say those fears weren't real. But this is where technology starts to make a real difference, helping chip away at those fears. And probably the biggest single innovation was the Caravel.
Ah, the Caravel. Heard a lot about that. What made it such a game changer? How did it tackle those fears we were just talking about?
Well, the Caravel, it wasn't just, a better ship. It was more like a symbol. Technology adapting to meet this totally new challenge. Sailing into the complete unknown. Key things. It had maybe 2, sometimes 3 masts with these triangular lateen sails. That meant it could actually sail against the wind, or at least closer to it. Windward sailing, huge deal. Plus, a proper stern rudder for better steering, and it didn't sit too deep in the water shallow draft. Perfect for nosing around coastlines you knew nothing about. It was basically built for discovery.
So it gave them the actual tool to kind of peek around the corner of the map.
Precisely. And it wasn't just the ship. They got better with the compass that came from China and the Arab world originally, but they improved it. Map making got better, slowly. Ptolemy's maps were still influential but had big errors. And things like the astrolabe for figuring out your latitude using the stars became absolutely essential.
And driving all this push for innovation, this daring exploration, was Prince Henry the Navigator. Infante de Henrique lived 1394 to 1460. People call him the architect of discovery. But the really interesting thing is he wasn't actually a sailor himself, right? Which seems a bit odd for a navigator.
Yeah, that throws people sometimes. He wasn't out on the ships, no. But he was the visionary, the planner, the guy finding the money, the intellectual engine behind it all. His reasons were mixed. Part of it was strategic, trying to get around the North African Muslims, especially after they took Ceuta in 1415. He was also chasing that old legend of Prester John, hoping to find a Christian ally somewhere out there. And of course the big one, find a sea route to the spices and gold. Bypass the old routes.
So he wasn't just dreaming, he was building something concrete. What about this navigation school at Sagres? Tell us more about that. Was it a real school?
Well, school might be stretching it a bit, but at Sagres, right on the southwestern tip of Portugal, he definitely set up a center, maybe more like a research institute. It became this hub. They collected charts and reports from sailors coming back, worked on better ship designs, made more accurate maps, trained navigators in the latest techniques. He was meticulous, apparently, cross-checking info from traders, travelers, building up this massive database of practical knowledge about the African coast. Unprecedented, really.
That methodical approach, investing in knowledge, backing it with state resources, calculated risks. You could almost call it the Henry model for strategic R&D. It was incredibly advanced for his time. And his ships did start pushing down the West African coast from about 1421 onwards. They found and colonized Madeira in 1419, the Azores around 1427.
But the really big psychological leap came in 1434, the Bujador breakthrough. A captain named Gil Aines finally managed to sail past Cape Bujador. This place south of the Canaries, it had this terrifying reputation. End of the world stuff, sea monsters, boiling seas. Getting past it wasn't just about distance. It shattered those old, paralyzing superstitions. Huge mental victory.
That's fascinating. So maybe that psychological barrier at Cape Bujador was even tougher than the physical challenges. And once they broke through that, it sort of unlocked everything else. They just kept going, steadily, about 1 degree of latitude south each year, establishing their lead. Henry's foresight, even though he never sailed himself, it really did lay the groundwork. It's almost like building NASA before anyone seriously thought about the moon.
Yeah.
But momentum can stall, right? After Henry died in 1460, things did slow down for a bit, lost their main backer. Luckily, King Afonso V saw the potential was still there, and he came up with some pretty smart ways to get things moving again.
He did. He basically offered a deal. Anyone willing to explore 100 leagues further south each year, that's nearly 500 kilometers, would get exclusive trading rights for 5 years in any new lands they found. And low taxes, too. It was clever. Outsourced the risk, really. Incentivized private merchants to pick up where Henry left off.
And someone did jump on board.
Yep. A merchant named Fernão Gomes took the deal in 1469. And under his contract, exploration really sped up again, pushing down the West African coast right into the Gulf of Guinea. And that's where they hit the jackpot, around 1470. The Gold Coast, modern Ghana.
Gold Coast. So the legends were true.
Apparently so. The explorers were stunned, found local people wearing gold jewelry, just like the story said. They named the place Elmina the Mine. Big economic win for Portugal. Finally, tangible returns on all that investment.
But this is also where things start getting complicated and darker. The beginnings of the slave trade connection.
Yeah, unfortunately. It started initially as a kind of internal African trade system facilitated by the Portuguese. See, to get the gold, they needed stuff to trade for it. They made contact with the Benin Kingdom, modern Nigeria. Quite sophisticated place. Centralized government, big army, skilled metal workers. Initially, the Portuguese traded things like copper to Benin in exchange for enslaved people. Then they took those enslaved people further down the coast to the Gold Coast and traded them for gold. So it formed this internal triangular trade within Africa first. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? This period of, quote, discovery and economic success for Portugal is also laying the foundation for the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade later on, that dark duality.
And wasn't always straightforward, even then. You mentioned Benin eventually stopped trading slaves with them.
That's right. Around 1514, the Benin Kingdom decided they needed their own people more, partly for their military campaigns. So they stopped selling slaves to the Portuguese. Shows the African kingdoms had their own agency and agendas, too.
Okay, so they're pushing down Africa, finding gold, getting involved in these complex, sometimes grim trade networks. But the ultimate prize, India, is still out there. Late 15th century now, things are heating up. And then comes the big moment, rounding Africa.
Bartolomeu Dias, 1488. A truly critical milestone. He manages to sail all the way around the southern tip of Africa. He apparently called it the Cape of Storms, which sounds about right, given the weather down there. But King John II, probably thinking about marketing, renamed it the Cape of Good Hope.
Huh. Good PR move. Cape of Storms doesn't exactly scream, come sail this way.
Exactly. But Dias proved it could be done. The Atlantic and Indian Oceans were connected, the sea route to the east was possible, but Dias turned back. It was Vasco da Gama who finished the job. That epic voyage started in 1497. 4 ships, 170 men, setting off from Lisbon, sailing into the real unknown, aiming for India itself.
And he makes it.
Yeah.
May 1498, he arrives in Calicut, India, first European to get there by sea. Opens up that direct route, must have been incredible. But the reception wasn't exactly welcoming flowers and parades, was it?
Not quite. Think about it. The Indian Ocean trade had been dominated for centuries by Muslim merchants. They saw the Portuguese arrival as a major threat to their business, so they resisted, tried to block the Portuguese from buying spices like pepper. Things got tense. Da Gama wasn't exactly subtle either. When the local ruler in Calicut stalled on trade deals and Arab merchants attacked a Portuguese trading post they'd set up, Da Gama hit back hard. He actually bombarded the city.
Wow. So it wasn't just discovery, it was forceful market entry. Aggressive tactics right from the start.
Pretty much. He did eventually find a rival city-state, Cochin, further south, that was willing to trade. He managed to load up on spices there. But it really highlights that difficult truth, doesn't it? History makers aren't always
Yeah.
Nice. Da Gama is celebrated as this great explorer, but his methods were brutal and destructive for many local people.
And despite losing ships, losing men on the brutal return journey, the profit was astronomical.
Unbelievable. Estimates are around an 800% profit for the investors who backed the voyage. That kind of return, it just unleashed a frenzy. Everyone wanted a piece of the India trade. More expeditions followed thick and fast.
So the 16th century kicks off, and Portugal's basically going global, expanding incredibly fast,
Yeah.
and sometimes finding things they weren't even looking for.
Absolutely. Take Pedro Alvarez Cabral in 1500. He's leading the second major expedition to India. To catch the best winds, they do this maneuver called the Volta do Mar, sailing way out west into the Atlantic. And oops, he bumps right into the coast of South America. Brazil. He claims it for Portugal, calls it Veracruz initially, and crucially, it falls on Portugal's side of the line drawn by the Treaty of Tordesillas a few years earlier. Pure luck, but hugely significant.
So Cabral accidentally becomes the first guy to link Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Asia in one single trip. That's mind-boggling.
It really is. And the push east continued relentlessly.
Yeah.
You have Afonso de Albuquerque, this brilliant, ruthless military commander. He conquers Malacca in 1511.
Malacca, that's the big trading hub in Southeast Asia, right?
Yes.
Bottleneck.
Exactly. Capturing that opens the way to the legendary Spice Islands, the Maluku Islands, the only place you could get nutmeg and cloves back then. Immense wealth.
And they kept going. Thailand.
China.
First European contacts with the Ayutthaya Kingdom in Thailand. Jorge Alvarez reaches China in 1513. Rafael Perestrello gets to Guangzhou in 1516. They were everywhere. And think about the tech transfer. They bring European firearms arquebuses, these early muskets, into East Asia. That actually has a long-term impact. It influences, for example, the development of Japanese matchlocks, which become crucial in later conflicts like the Imjin War between Japan and Korea.
Wow, those ripple effects. Though it wasn't all smooth sailing with China.
No, definitely not. There were early conflicts with the Ming dynasty over trade, sovereignty. The Portuguese actually lost some battles, but eventually they negotiated a deal to establish a trading post at Macau in 1557. That became hugely important.
Of course, all this is happening while their big rival, Spain, is doing its own thing. While Portugal's dominating the east, Spain is funding Columbus going west, starting in 92. He thinks he's hit the East Indies, but nope, it's the Americas.
Which leads to that Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 you mentioned, basically carving up the new world between them.
Pretty much. A line down the Atlantic, Portugal gets everything east of it, Africa, Asia, Brazil. Spain gets everything west, most of the Americas. An audacious plan, really.
Still shapes the world today, linguistically and culturally. And then Magellan, a Portuguese guy, sailing for Spain, tries to go all the way around.
Ferdinand Magellan, yeah. Sets off in 1519. He dies in the Philippines, but one of his ships makes it back in 1522. First circumnavigation of the globe. Proves definitively the Earth is round. Amazing feat, but that westward route to the Spice Islands turned out to be way too long and dangerous for regular trade. Portugal's eastern route was still better.
Meanwhile, the Spanish conquistadors are just tearing through the Americas. Cortez in Mexico, Pizarro in Peru.
Yeah, 1520s, 1530s. They conquer huge empires, Aztec, Inca, and suddenly, vast amounts of silver and gold start pouring into Spain. That flood of wealth actually causes massive inflation back in Europe, the price revolution, economists call it.
So by the mid-1500s, the world is connected in a way it never ever was before. Europe, Africa, the Americas, Asia, all linked by these sea routes pioneered by Portugal and Spain. A truly globalized world, for better and for worse. But empires rise. And, well, they often face challenges staying at the top. Portugal's golden age couldn't last forever. That huge empire must have been incredibly hard to manage.
It was, absolutely. Think about the sheer distances involved. Portugal itself was a small country, relatively speaking, trying to control territories from Brazil, across Africa, India, all the way to Southeast Asia. The logistics, the manpower, the cost, it just stretched them incredibly thin. They became vulnerable.
And other European powers were getting into the game too, right?
Exactly. By the 17th century, the Dutch especially, they had powerful trading companies, bigger fleets, maybe more focused commercial ambitions. They largely pushed the Portuguese out of the super lucrative Spice Islands trade. That was a major blow.
And then something happens back home in Lisbon, something catastrophic. The 1755 earthquake.
The Great Lisbon Earthquake. Yeah, that's often seen as maybe a symbolic endpoint for the Age of Discovery, in a way. It was just devastating. Happened on All Saints' Day, November 1st. Massive earthquake, then tsunamis crashing into the city, then huge fires breaking out. The death toll estimates are staggering, anywhere from 30,000 to maybe even 100,000 people. Wiped out a huge chunk of Lisbon's population, destroyed maybe half the buildings. The economic hit was enormous.
That's unimaginable.
It really shook Portugal, not just physically, but psychologically, too. The Queen of the Seas, humbled, they had to rebuild. And ironically, part of the funding for that reconstruction actually came from the wealth still flowing in from colonies like Brazil.
Which brings us sort of full circle. Today, Portugal is, a smaller nation within Europe, gets EU aid, IMF help sometimes. You even hear people jokingly call the language Brazilian because Brazil has so many more speakers now. The former colony kind of overshadows the old empire in population terms.
It's a fascinating historical irony. But even so, that memory, that legacy of the Age of Discovery, it's still incredibly central to Portuguese identity. It's woven into the fabric of the country.
Oh, you absolutely see it. The architecture alone is breathtaking, that Manueline style.
Yes. Flourished under King Manuel I, right at the height of the discoveries, early 16th century. It's unique. All those maritime motifs carved into the stone, coral, shells, ropes, anchors, astrolabes, it's discovery made visible.
Like the Jerónimos Monastery in Lisbon.
Prime example. Built to celebrate Vasco da Gama's voyage, honor Prince Henry, and fittingly, da Gama's tomb is right there inside. And Belém Tower, that iconic fortress guarding the harbor entrance, the Princess of the Tagus River, they call it sometimes. Beautiful.
And much more recently, that big monument, the Padrão dos Descobrimentos.
The Discovery Monument, yeah. Built in 1960 for the 500th anniversary of Prince Henry's death. You see Henry right at the front, leading this wedge of figures, explorers, mapmakers, patrons, all staring out to sea, and it stands right near the spot where da Gama's ships actually set sail for India. Very powerful symbolism.
And you can't talk Portugal without mentioning photo music, right?
Definitely not. One of the 3 Fs, they say. Fatima, football, and fado. That melancholic folk music full of saudade, that untranslatable longing, nostalgia. Especially Lisbon fado, you often feel it carries echoes of that past imperial glory, a sadness for lost greatness. It's the sound of the empire's long shadow.
So yeah, from the grand buildings to the soulful music, those echoes are everywhere. A constant reminder of when this small nation really did steer the course of the world.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What's the big picture here? Portugal's age of discovery. It's just an incredible story, isn't it? Small nation, big vision, amazing technology, sheer guts. They redrew the world map. From Henry's careful planning to da Gama's, well, let's call it audacious voyage. It's extraordinary stuff. It really is. And zooming out, there are some powerful lessons, I think. It definitely shows the impact of that Henry model we talked about. Strategic, long-term investment in knowledge and tech, taking calculated risks, fostering that whole ecosystem for innovation. And the Bujador breakthrough idea, how conquering one big psychological fear can unlock so much progress, pushing past perceived limits. But crucially, it also forces us to confront that darker side, the duality. Exploration and empire building often went hand in hand with violence, exploitation, the beginnings of the slave trade. Progress, especially that kind of progress, almost always came at a heavy human cost.
So let's crystallize some key takeaways for you. Listening at home. 1. The Henry model for strategic R&D. Think about that long game. Portugal's success wasn't just luck. It was deliberate investment in knowledge and tech, accepting risk. How important is that kind of long-term vision today? 2. The Bujador breakthrough beating fear. Remember Cape Bujador. Sometimes the biggest barriers aren't physical, they're in our heads. Overcoming one core fear can open up whole new possibilities. 3. Discovery's double edge. History isn't simple heroes and villains. Portugal's glory had a shadow of violence and exploitation. We have to acknowledge both sides when we look at progress and empire. 4. Identity forged in history. Look at Manueline architecture. Listen to Fado. A nation's past echoes powerfully in its culture long after its peak influence fades. 5. Deep interconnectedness. Those Portuguese arquebuses ending up in Asian wars. It shows how interconnected the world became, much earlier than we might think. Actions in one place have ripple effects everywhere. So thinking about Portugal's incredible, complex journey, here's a final thought. What are the unknown oceans we face today as a society? What deep-seated fears hold us back? And maybe, just maybe, what lessons, both the triumphs and the harsh warnings, can we take from Portugal's deep dive as we try to navigate our own uncharted future?